Welcome to another episode of my podcast, Maritime History with me, live and unplugged. And tonight I'm trying something different. I've First of all, apologies for my unkempt look. I have been um, staring at my laptop for the last 3 days, writing up to my eyeballs in Bristol Beauforts and torpedo bombers through the Battle of Britain period and beyond. And I looked at the time and realised it was sort of 10:30 at night, the night before podcast release day, and I need to do one. And when I open up Substack, they have this new sort of recording studio thing going on, and I thought, why not give it a try, see what people think. Uh, Although, looking at the state of me and of my bookshelves, apologies for that. I'd like to say that they're usually a lot tidier, but I've kind of got this academic, got to pull one out, put one down. There's also the pile of books there that don't necessarily have a home yet because I need more bookshelves. It's the continuing problem. Anyway, the other thing is the camera might die randomly through this. It did in the last attempt. Got to 10 minutes and just turned itself off. So I'm going to try and talk for as long as I can. Anyway, so this week, blockades. I was planning on talking about blockades anyway, with reference to the First World War. However, our favourite president has weighed in and announced a blockade of Iran this previous weekend. If you're hearing this on the if you're one of the subscribers, that makes sense. If you're not a paid subscriber, you'll get that a week and a bit ago. He's announced his blockade. The things probably have changed by now, but at the time of recording, the American Navy are going to blockade Iran. So there are two types of blockade, three technically. And by the time of the First World War, Britain is falling back on the use of a blockade to besiege and strangle Germany economically, and also to deny them of certain foodstuffs, etc. It is a way of defeating the enemy. It's kind of like besieging the enemy. If you go back to the Middle Ages, you just encircle a guy's fortress, wait for them to run out of food and supplies, and after they finish eating each other, people will surrender, and then you can take the castle. Pretty much the same thing, but you use the navy to do so. And I'm now going to deploy one of the high-tech graphics, no expense spared, that you'd kind of expect to have come from me. So here we have there, it worked. This is the German, the North Sea during the First World War. I did find in the previous one that me pointing with the cursor doesn't help. So if you look at the top of the map, you'll see the line of British mines. This is also where the British fleet are based in Scapa Flow. This is a distant blockade. It stops all ships going into the North Sea from coming in from America, South America, the Pacific. Of course, the channel further to the sort of southwest is cut off anyway. That's blocked off by the Royal Navy and indeed by German mines themselves. And basically nothing can get into Germany. The Grand Fleet's warships are stationed in Scapa Flow, the big stuff, and the blockade itself is managed by cruisers and auxiliary cruisers, which are usually sort of merchant ships or liners that have been adapted, and they police the area, all the approaches, including the Denmark Strait, everything between Scotland and Iceland, and then everything from Iceland up to Greenland, and that stops any ships coming in with raw materials for Germany. Now, you'd think that Germany, being a continental power, wouldn't need that much. They could obviously, you can get stuff from the continent. You've got your own food, we'll be able to get our own resources. Well, yeah, but also no. In the First World War, Germany obviously needs a lot of iron ore, and they do have their own iron ore mines in Alsace-Lorraine. However, more is always good, and they're getting deliveries from Norway and Sweden down through the Baltic, although there are now 3 British submarines in the Baltic, which pretty much close it to shipping, or also sailing down from Narvik around Norway and into the Baltic that way. Sorry. and this can be interdicted by the blockade. Standard thing is you come across a ship that's neutrally flagged. If it's German flagged, you follow cruiser rules and sink it. If it's neutral flagged, you signal them and order them to come to you, to the nearest base where you can inspect them, inspect the manifest, and see if the cargo is contraband or not. If it is contraband, you can impose it or impound it and put it into your own cause, or and then they can argue in the prize court later. If it's non-contraband, you can send them on their way. Um, the other option is the closer blockade. This would be for the Royal Navy to station itself off Wilhelmshaven and Kiel in the sort of the east southeast of the map, within sight of the shore, and that would stop anyone getting into the ports. There, by the this kind of works the Napoleonic War because you can have a close blockade of smaller ships like frigates, and then have the bigger warships further out. And to a degree, you could do that with in the First World War, but it does endanger the warships. All the time they're in Scapa, they can't be got hold of. All the time they're in the North Sea, they can be attacked by U-boats or fast-moving torpedo boats. There's also, the closer you get to the German shore, you have minefields, and you don't know where the German mines are, so you're endangering the fleet. Even more so if you want to go into go through the Kattegat into the Baltic. It's it's a nightmare. You really need sort of, I mean, I know they do it in like 1905 or something just to show the Kaiser that that the Royal Navy can do it, but you need local pilots to navigate the straits through the Kattegat into the Baltic. Um, Same with like Wilhelmshaven and Kiel and the Jade and Weser estuaries. These areas are policed by German warships. There are shore batteries. If you get too close to the shore, you are going to get bombarded. You might hit a mine, you can sink. You've also got to bear in mind wear and tear, because you can you can move ships on a steady rotation from Scapa to the North Atlantic to monitor shipping, but it becomes a real danger when you're moving stuff backwards and forwards over the North Sea. You think about the amount of fuel you're using before you get to the North Sea, get to the German coast. It's like in 1914, you have German cruisers policing off Mexico before the war to represent Germany's needs, and the Leipzig had to sail from China and Tsingtao base all the way across the Pacific to relieve the Nuremberg, which then went all the way back. This is a larger, I mean, it's a bit of an extreme example because sailing across the Pacific is totally different to sailing across the North Sea, but it's that kind of wear and tear that you have to bear in mind, fuel usage. And obviously in the North Sea, as I said, you are exposing your vessels to possible U-boat attack and Zeppelin bombing, which is also a problem that doesn't get talked enough about. When you're in a blockade, you are stationary or patrolling a certain area, which does leave you quite vulnerable to attack. So a distant blockade is preferable by the First World War. You then have the third type of blockade, the counter blockade, and this is something that the Germans have to do quite a lot because they want to try and blockade Britain to try and stop them from blockading them. This kind of comes out originally. You have like the Cruiser Krieg period, but that's kind of limited because they only have a certain amount of warships abroad at the start of the war. Dresden and Karlsruhe off America, off the east coast of America, Leipzig off the west coast of America, Nuremberg somewhere in the Pacific, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, which aren't really up for Cruiser Krieg for multitude of reasons that I've probably talked about before. And then you've got the Guiers and the Emden in the Indian Ocean, and finally the Königsberg off Africa, which is not enough to have an effective blockade, although they do have an impact, which I'll get to in a minute. Post Jutland, the U-boat arm come out and reckon that they do a calculation that if they can sink something like 600,000 tons of shipping a month, I think, kind of pulling a number out of the air at the moment. It's 25 past 11 at night. I'm a bit tired. and but they believe if they can sink this certain amount of tonnage a month, that within 6 weeks to 3 months they can starve Britain out. You know, cut down on their grain supplies, fuel supplies coming from America, and if they can do all this before America gets hacked off enough to declare war and get its expeditionary force across the across the Atlantic. This calculation doesn't pay off, and uh, but it was a close run thing. Same thing kind of happens in the Second World War with Operation Neuland and the U-boats attacking oil facilities in the Caribbean, and it has quite a serious knock-on effect to not only the British war machine. Like the Royal Navy can't mount as many patrols. Bomber Command can't launch as many sorties. They have to find new sources for aluminium, but also the American war machine as well, because they're reliant on not so much the oil coming in, but definitely the aluminium for aircraft production. Um, Germany, however, is starved, um, and it yep, there goes the camera. Germany is indeed starved though, and let me put the North Sea map back up. And it does have a serious effect on the German economy. The there are it and their ability to wage war. Same thing happens in the Second World War with the Allied stranglehold, um, and I mean, the big one is oil. Germany needs oil, and they can't get it. Same with Japan to a degree. Although they have access to oil, they don't really capitalize on the success in Dutch Indonesia, and then the Americans' submarine campaign comes in and basically destroys all the logistics. Um, and it's a slow way to strangle them to death. It could be argued that the British blockade in the First World War did more to defeat the German war machine than possibly the British Expeditionary Force, but that's a debate between naval and army historians for another day. So, what does this mean for Hormuz? Well, that is. Let me just bring up the other map. Bum, 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 bum. Sorry, I'm trying to get used to all this. Where is it? Hormuz. There we go. As you look at the Strait of Hormuz, it's not very wide, and I know I've drawn these parallels before. Um, and oh, what have I done? I know I've drawn these parallels before with the Dardanelles, but again, it is very, very similar for several reasons. The main one being the distance between the ships have to sail between the two coastlines and the ship sailing up the middle. You could do a close blockade. It wouldn't take much. In fact, the American Navy could probably park all its ships across and build a bridge across the strait, and stop shipping going through. However, it is incredibly dangerous, much like the Dardanelles Straits. Um, it doesn't matter how much firepower you have, there's always something that's going to get through. And although I know the president has stated that the entire Iranian navy has been sunk, the numbers seem to vary quite a bit. But he's also reportedly said that there is still a danger from small, fast-moving motorboats with detonators on them. This is very similar to German Lenzen in the Second World War. I believe the Japanese and the Italians had the same thing, depending on the dedication of the crews. And the idea that these small-moving jet skis and motorboats could just suddenly pop up, they don't even need a port to be launched, head straight towards an American warship and explode against the hull, causing damage. Whether they can get through or not, whether the Americans are able to repel them or not, I'm not a modern military guy, so I can't say for certain, but there is a possibility. Same with drones. I don't know much about drones, apart from that I want one, but I don't want to lose it because I'd send it across the river to look at the forts and then have to row out to get it, or fly it into a wall. But there is the possibility of drone strikes on ships. You would be to put yourself in those straits would be to make yourself vulnerable to attack. Um, there was a suggestion from a YouTuber, Ryan Macbeth. He's really good. Go check him out. He's also got his own Substack, but he does sort of intelligence analysis and tactics and things, world military strategy. And he was saying that the Americans could always repeat what the Portuguese did in the 16th century and take Hormuz Island, which I believe is in the middle of the strait. I'm afraid my geography of this region is a little bit shaky, but that would allow the like they could be like a stone fortress, a stone frigate, and they could stop any ships going in or out operating from there using smaller craft and or helicopters. Um, they've also got the ability to have a rolling aerial blockade where they can just, you know, order ships back, threaten to sink them, you know, anything they really wanted, and maintain aerial superiority. Um, I would argue against. Oh, the other thing is the possibility of mines. Now, the sea mine is very, very basic, but very, very effective, as we've seen in my Dardanelles posts. I'm sure we can all remember the picture of the Beauvais rolling over, having been struck by a mine, and Ottoman artillery. HMS Irresistible, which had been sort of mined and then shelled, and again HMS Ocean, pretty much the same thing. 3 battleships in one morning. We're looking at the same sort of thing. Doesn't take much for a sea mine to head out. And they're really low tech as well. So it would be easily suggested that instead they go for a distant blockade. And if I go to slide 3, there we go. Right. So as you can see from the Persian Gulf, you don't necessarily need to be in that space. You could operate further out off the coast of Oman, in the Arabian Sea, and you would be just as able to stop vessels coming in or out. It gives you a lot more space to maneuver in. You don't have to worry about sort of the lengths and the style attacks or mines as much. There are several drawbacks though to this blockade idea. The first one is a very obvious one, is that apparently China, according to Ryan Macbeth, China is going to will run out of oil reserves by the 6th of June. So China might want to force the blockade to get to the oil that it usually buys from Iran. Now, it can send its own ships. Would the Americans turn them away and cause a diplomatic incident? Now, they can do that to Britain because we won't stand for that for long, but what can we do? They could do it to Germany, and they won't stand for that, but, you know, what can they actually do? China, they do have one of the biggest navies in the world, and one of the biggest, well, if not the biggest army in the world. If they wanted to make it an international incident, they could. Will America block them, especially if they send warships? If they send warships to escort their tankers, what will the Americans do? This is a question well out the scope of this podcast, so I'm not even going to attempt to answer that. But it would be problematic. The other thing is you're going to upset the Iranian people. Now, I'm sure that's not on anyone's radar in the Pentagon, but think about it this way. In the First World War, the priority people for food, beyond the upper echelons of society, are the German military. They get first dibs on raw materials and food. The civilians suffer. Now, in Iran, the first people who are going to get access to everything beyond the upper echelons will be the Revolutionary Guard and then the military. And it'll be the people that suffer and starve. But it will be painted in the same way that the Germans did, that this isn't their fault. This is the blockading people's fault. The Americans are doing this to us. They are making you starve. They are the ones that are ruining the economy. They are responsible. In this, as I said, in Germany, it was painted the British blockade is brutal and barbaric. It's a war crime. they suggested, and that didn't that didn't catch on. But they did argue that it was a war crime, and they tried to get the Red Cross involved. But what were they going to do about the British blockade? And ultimately nothing. Same with this. But there'll be a lot of hatred stirred up again from the very people that you need to overthrow the theocracy. It's an evil regime that needs to be overthrown. You need to have the people on side. If you don't have the people on side, it doesn't work. And you're just going to continue to breed hate in the region. The other thing is the effect on the other economies. Now, again, cycling back to the First World War, for Britain, it wasn't too much of a problem because we were still able to import goods and supplies with mostly impunity, except for those brief periods of U-boat surges in 1915 and again in 1917. But other than that, it wasn't too much of an issue. America wasn't bothered. France was able to get the raw materials it wanted. Russia is its own thing. The Russian economy in 1917 was pretty much on its knees. It was very dependent on industrial equipment coming from France and Britain. Obviously, we're prioritizing our economies and our peoples, and giving the Russians what's left. The main site for agriculture for Russia, being the Ukraine, suddenly finds that under German and Austro-Hungarian control. So their economy just begins to collapse. But that's different. But France and Britain are okay, and America is fine. The Western allies are all good. Same in the Second World War. Yes, there are certain raw materials that we're unable to get hold of. Rubber becomes quite problematic in places. Operation Neuland, the U-boats operating in the Caribbean in early 1942, causes massive fuel problems and aluminium issues, which impact not only the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force's ability to go to carry out operations in the spring of 1942, but also aircraft production for both Britain and America comes under strain when the bauxite isn't coming out of the Caribbean. Obviously, for Germany and Japan and Italy, it's a lot worse. And yes, you get the one or two odd blockade runners coming through, but that's about it. But other economies are also affected. The neutral powers have to try and find alternative markets. There's also, if there's an opportunity, a possibility of your ships being sunk, then the ship captains don't go to sea. And let's face it, if you're worried that your £1 million tanker might get sunk, you don't really want to take it through the Straits of Hormuz. Same in the First World War, you get a lot of shipping in South America that's bottled up because there's German cruisers operating at the Dresden and the Karlsruhe off the eastern side of South America, the Leipzig off the western side, the Nuremberg is operating in the Pacific, Königsberg is off Africa, the Kronprinz Wilhelm is rattling around the Caribbean and as far down as Argentina, the Emden is in the Indian Ocean, etc. And this has an impact because most of the ships that are going to sea are British flagged, and they don't want to risk being stopped by the Germans, so they don't go. And this starts having a negative effect on the economies of South America and indeed America as well. When the Leipzig pulls into San Francisco, the whole grain harvests have to be thrown away because they're left to mulch in a warehouse. They can't be transferred because there's a German cruiser outside, and the captains don't want to risk it. There's also hiccups with trade with up to Seattle and then into Canada, all because of this one German cruiser. And we're looking at this again with the Strait of Hormuz. Only oil is something that we all use. I mean, I know the Americans are drilling their own, and they've got the access to the stuff in Venezuela, but at the same time, the price of oil is sort of internationally controlled. So even if you can drill your own, the price is set by someone external, and you can bet that the oil companies will go with the external price because it's higher. And everyone is kind of reliant on oil. We all kind of need it. And setting up this blockade is going to hack off a lot of other nations. It's going to have a massive economic effect the world over. So is this something else that the Americans are going to have to contend with and be kind of bullish about? The big question is, why is he going with a blockade? Well, my answer is kind of skeptical in a way. I think it's because, well, I've heard that the Americans might have run low on munitions, that they've gone in, they fired off 1,000,001 rounds, and they found themselves now short of munitions. And this blockade, um, as well as giving you a bit of clout in the peace talks, is also a way of buying time for your logistics. And again, I go back to the Dardanelles. The Royal Navy ran out of ammunition and was ordering its ships to fire um, sparingly in the bombardments, often with just one gun per turret to save ammunition. In 1915, you get the massive shell shortage crisis that affects the army and the navy. But when it comes to naval logistics, the priority is always going to be the Grand Fleet in case the German High Seas Fleet put to sea. The force in the Eastern Mediterranean gets what's left, and they start to run short on ammunition. And so there are days where they don't go into. I mean, the bad weather helps as well, but there are days they can't go in and fire off as many rounds as they want. Are the Americans playing for time? Have a blockade because that gives you time to catch up on your logistics, get fresh ammunition out there, and fuel, etc. Maybe fresh rotations of crews. It buys time, but it is going to have this massive negative effect. Those of you listening on Spotify in a week's time probably will know more about this than I do at this current point. But we just kind of have to wait and see how this unfolds. I can see why they think a blockade might be a good idea. I just don't think that it will be, and that it's going to have some serious knock-on effects, not just for Iran, but also for the region. And because Kuwait and Iraq are also suffering, they're at the end of the Persian Gulf. They can't get ships out either, necessarily, depending on how the Americans decide to play this. And it's also going to have effect on the world's economy as a bit of a destabilizing factor. But we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure they know what they're doing, but as I fear I'm starting to babble a little bit, I'm going to call that an end. Thank you ever so much for joining me on this random podcast, and I hope that this has kind of made sense. Sorry about the camera disappearing in the middle of it, but yeah, if you links are in the for all the socials are below. If you like what you hear or you want to read some of my essays, do head over to my Substack. Again, links are on the link tree in the description. And if you really, really like my work and you want to see the longer form essays, more extended episodes, like I've just done two large articles on U-505 and the suicide of the Captain Leutnant Zesh. And you can get the first half for free, and then for the extra half, if you want to subscribe, all the buttons are there. But right, as it's pressing near midnight, actually 11:41, this is the time the Titanic hit the iceberg. So it seems like an even good place to end it. So thanks very much, guys. I will catch you next week.